so much for checking out the Sportsline Podcast on the CHCH and Parrot Media platform. I'm Bubba O'Neil. As I say on a daily basis, this podcast is a space to highlight and celebrate Southern Ontario's outstanding athletes, coaches, broadcasters, and even those executives. Friends, when I think of greatness on and off the football field at the Canadian level, a few names come to mind. Obviously, Russ Jackson, Andy Fantuz, Rob Hitchcock, and Mike O'Shea, to name a few. No doubt this individual stands right with those fellas. A first-round draft pick out of the University of Western Ontario, a captain of a Vanier Cup winning squad, a dozen seasons at fullback in the Canadian Football League, and 2 Grey Cup rings. With that said, for a whole new generation, Duane Forde is one of the top analysts at TSN. In addition, he's a lover of identifying, supporting, and promoting Canadian talent. Let's say hello to one of the best in the business, Duane. It's been a long time. Looking forward to chatting with you. Welcome to the Sportsline Podcast.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Hey, Duane, let's get right to it. There's so much to talk about that I think is just so interesting. I think so interesting to our fans that listen and watch. It amazed me when I started to go over things about your career all week. You retired 23 years ago. It didn't seem that long to me.
Yeah, I guess it's just a case of the older we get, the faster time goes by, right? So to us, it just seems like yesterday. But I don't know. I've got knees and hips that feel like it's been a while.
That's because you always made contact. You initiated contact as a fullback. When I went back and looked at, especially your stuff at Western University. Hey, I know it's been a long career and a very successful career with Western and of course Calgary, 4 teams, ending with the Tiger Cats. Actually, when you think about those playing days, what comes to mind for you?
The biggest thing to me, quite honestly, is that it's about the people. To me, great teams are made up of great people, and that's a part that I have always enjoyed. Is just obviously everything on the field was great, but typically the teams I was on, I especially think to the days in Calgary, we always had a great locker room, great dynamic, great attitude, all of that people don't necessarily see that goes into creating success on the field.
Starting at the University of Western, at that time, was football in your plans? Was that what you wanted to do? Did you want to be a professional football player?
I did, but I also knew that the odds are stacked against that, and was preparing for other things. But I grew up in a family of Toronto Argonaut season ticket holders, and dreamt of one day playing, of course, in the Canadian Football League. By the time I was 18 years old and in university, my recruiting visit at Western was led by Blake Marshall, who had just been the 2nd overall pick in the CFL draft, and a guy playing fullback, the position I wanted to play, and Jamie Terrace, who had been a 2nd round pick in the same draft. And both those guys obviously went on to great success in the CFL. So in that sense, I knew it was a possibility. But the fact is, I was also preparing to be a high school teacher, which my father was an educator for a number of years and retired as a principal from the Peel board.
These professional days, when you look at these days, what comes to mind?
Again, a lot of great memories, both on and off the field. Yeah, just love of the game. There was nothing about it that I would trade for even a moment.
There's a lot of people sometimes that when they get to the professional level, it maybe wasn't what they expected. Was this everything that you expected?
There were definitely some eye-opening moments. You realize that there is an element of professional sports that is a business, and that's a little bit different, obviously, than what you experience in high school and university. But in terms of the football part of it and the enjoyment of that, and as I said, the being part of a team, those things did not let me down in any way.
You've been on TV so long that we just kind of expected, he just made the switch to TV. But it wasn't always that way. What led you to being a football commentator?
Yeah, it definitely wasn't part of the plan. As I said, I had intended to be a high school teacher. it goes back to my second last year in the league, 2001, and that was my first year in Hamilton. That year we ended up losing in the East Final against Winnipeg. I had come from Calgary as a free agent, and Calgary was playing in the Grey Cup against Winnipeg. Grey Cup was in Montreal. And so with a bunch of my buddies from Western, actually, we decided, who doesn't love a road trip to Montreal at that stage of our lives for a weekend? And so we decided to go and see the game. And, as we're there, we watched the game. One of the people there covering the game was a reporter I had crossed paths with going back to my days at Western, Elliot Friedman. Mm-hmm. And I think by that point, Elliot would have been working for The Score. But Elliot had been in charge of I forget whether it was the radio station or the school paper, but Elliot was the sports editor during my time at Western. And so our paths crossed frequently, obviously, during our time in university, but as well as we both sort of graduated and moved on to our respective careers in different aspects of sport, our paths continued to cross. And so Elliot was out with us after the game. Bunch of guys he knew from Western as well. And he and I just got chatting about the game. And he said, if you're not playing next year, or if you guys don't make the playoffs, you should come to The Score and be our in-studio playoff analyst. And so sure enough, I played one more year, and I kind of wish I didn't, but we ended up missing the playoffs that year. I think we were 7-11. And looking to recoup a little bit of my my lost playoff money, I decided to give Elliot a call and take him up on his offer, and that was the beginning of it. For that year, 02 and 03, I went in during the playoffs and worked as studio analyst for them during the playoffs, and then they offered me more of a full-time job after that led to co-hosting the show CFL Snap and calling games on OUA Rush for a number of years. And so it right place, right time, I guess. And it has worked out and gone from there.
It certainly has worked out. I mean, one of the top dogs at TSN, where you do get an ability to be in close with the athletes, be really in tight with the game as well too, and I think that's got to be a pleasure for you, because you're right. I mean, even my career in football is nothing like yours or whatever, but being able to be close to the game, I know means a lot to me. I'm sure it does to you as well too.
Yeah, one of the things I say to people all the time, just in regards to the job, is it's like any other job in terms of some of the headaches and so on, whether it's things that you may perceive as politics or administrative hassles and things like that come with literally every job. But the fact is, ultimately, I get paid to watch football and talk about it, so there's not a whole lot I can complain about.
Is there one game as a broadcaster that sticks out with you that you'll never forget?
I don't know necessarily about complete games. There are a lot of moments or plays within games that I remember more than complete games. Mm-hmm. I remember a Montreal-Toronto game that was at Rogers Center years ago that ended with a series of kickouts going back and forth from the end zone. And, it was kind of neat, as I had a coach tell me this year that he actually used my explanation during that broadcast to teach some of the new American players in training camp about the rules surrounding kickout and how you had to give yards and so on. So, I mean, that's one that stuck with me. Certain games where players have had big days and those sorts of things. I remember doing Bo Levi Mitchell's first start, for example, as a young guy in Calgary, and he was making his first start in Winnipeg. Given the way his career has gone, that's one that stood out. And I would say similar things for a guy like Zach Collaros, who's been in the league for a long time. A number of as I say, moments, milestones, and plays that really stand out more than entire games at this point.
It's funny you bring up a name like Bo Levi Mitchell, and it kind of leads us to where I'd like to ask you about. And you were still playing when the Ticats won a Grey Cup. Actually, we talked about it a while ago. I think there's a certain amount of paranoia. There's a certain amount of worry that's going on right now with the Ticats, even at 9-6. they've had a really, really tough loss, one of their worst since 2017 in last week's game against Winnipeg. I know there was a game that was hyped up as the best versus the East versus the West in Regina, and the Tiger Cats lost that one. There was a real tough one against BC where they lost in overtime. 9-6, they still lead the East Division, but there is a seeming lack of confidence for some with the Tiger Cats. At 9-6, 3 games remaining, where do you stand?
Yeah, I think I honestly worry less about the Tiger Cats. Teams are going to have their ups and downs over the course of an 18-game season, and that happens. And quite frankly, every now and then you're going to get it handed to you, like they did against Winnipeg on the weekend. You don't like to see it happen at this time of year, and that may be a bit of a concern. But I think that there are also some circumstances around that game that there may have been a little bit of a letdown for them, that having just clinched a playoff spot, being on the road, the way the game started, I thought put them in a real hole with the Vavel kick return. And sometimes things like that can just snowball, and you have that kind of day. And that, honestly, to me, can happen to any team. I think the biggest concern when you're the Hamilton Tiger Cats, quite frankly, is the Montreal Alouettes, and a Montreal team that obviously was playing very well at the start of the year, but has dealt with a number of injuries over the course of the year. And the fact that Montreal now is as healthy as they have been at any point this season, and particularly with the fact that they have a very good young quarterback in Davis Alexander back at the helm. So that's your biggest concern, is maybe what's in the rear view mirror. But overall, as I said, I think that the Tiger Cats have had a pretty good season, and they've been pretty good at bouncing back from some tough times.
Obviously, the big game against Toronto this weekend. Calgary comes to Hamilton. They get a week off, which is a weird bye week. And then Ottawa comes, which really Ottawa in the last game of the regular season may be playing for 2026. Montreal have a bye this week, back-to-back against Ottawa, and then they end their season at Winnipeg. Who has the more favorable schedule, do you think?
That's a tough one to answer, quite honestly, and a lot of it just has to do with the way that this season has gone. I think when you talk to coaches around the Canadian Football League, and even players who have been around for a long time, people will kind of quietly acknowledge that there have been some years in this league where, there are a couple games that you kind of know you're sort of 99% we should win that game. There's more of a feeling now, I don't know if you want to call it parity, but more of a feeling that on any given day that any team can beat any other team. And, in that regard, I don't know if there's a clear edge in terms of the schedule. Sometimes you get a situation when, you may look at a team like Ottawa that obviously has struggled this year. The record reflects that. That a team playing playing Ottawa a couple of times may have a little bit of an edge. But especially at this time of the year, you never know what lineup you're going to get for either team. Quite frankly, it may be the team that appears to have the advantage, maybe resting people or at least practicing some kind of load management as they prepare for the playoffs. It may be somebody steps up in terms of people playing for their jobs on a team like Ottawa. So I'm not going to give anybody a real clear edge on that one.
As we look at the standings, it reminds me of a couple of things that I'd love to discuss with you. Obviously, there's the big notification that came out, I guess it would have been a couple of weeks ago now, with the new rule changes in the Canadian Football League.
Yes.
Of course, 6 changes over, I guess, a matter of 2026 and 2027. I don't want to go through all the changes or what's happened. It's just, it's almost exhausted, I think, at this point right now. But I will ask you, Duane, while we have you here, was there one that you think will benefit the game more than any other?
In that regard, I don't know if any necessarily stands out in a huge way. I guess maybe the one for me probably has to do with the 35-second reset clock and the uniformity, the consistency that'll provide in terms of timekeeping and eliminating an advantage. I mean, that's the kind of thing that I like in terms of the rules. Time will tell overall in terms of some of the others as to. I've always said that I like the thinking. I like the idea that we're not just going to continue to do things a certain way because that's how we've always done them. Let's look and find maybe some of the things that 100 plus years into the life of the Canadian Football League that maybe made sense a long time ago that don't so much make sense now, and we change some of those things. But what occasionally comes with change when you look historically at this league is sometimes there are some unintended consequences. You change rules or change the field of play or whatever you want to call it, you make changes to the game with certain outcomes in mind, but I would say that there's no guarantee of those outcomes.
Were you surprised at the backlash? I mean, and I'll include some of the players, including Nathan Rourke, the highest paid player in the league, who was just so vocal. I'm actually surprised he didn't get fined for some of the things that he said, kind of not so much personally about the commissioner, but kind of a shot at him. Were you surprised at the backlash across the country?
I wasn't at all. And I've had this ongoing discussion especially this year with Luke Wilson, who is, new to our team at TSN and, has pointed out certain things that he sees about the Canadian Football League that he would like to see changed or improved. And, one of the things that I've said to Luke is just about how fiercely protective or defensive the Canadian Football League fan base is about change and about some of the things surrounding the game. And so in that sense, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that people don't like change. But again, I look at the specifics of the changes that were made and quite frankly, other changes that I would like to see that may have to do more with off-field issues. But there are things that have existed in the Canadian Football League for a number of years that in terms of the way they work simply don't make sense. And a lot of times people don't question them because it is what it is, or this may be the sport they watch the most and don't necessarily compare it to the way other sports or other leagues may conduct certain aspects of their business. And so, yeah, you're going to get that response. You're going to get that backlash. But I think, again, from my perspective as someone who is obviously pretty deeply invested in the Canadian Football League and the Canadian identity of the league, to this point, the things that I think are most important to that identity haven't been touched, haven't been changed. I hope they never are, but if they are, I can assure you that I'll definitely be part of the backlash.
I'm glad you said that because you do have deep roots in this game. I mean, there are people out there, Duane, you know this, they want you to be the commissioner, right? I mean, and I don't know what your involvement or what your thoughts are about that. That's for another show. But like, you have your own thoughts of the game as well, too. And one of the things that I know that you have been, and you and I have spoken off camera, you and I have spoken on other podcasts like this, and you've been very consistent in saying that you think as things should change every once in a while. We should modify. We should continue. That is a look at the way we look at the standings should be discussed. I mean, and we just brought up the standings a moment ago and what they look like in a East-West format. But can you explain to our viewers, as we look at the standings right now, the way you think we should go? We have a different standing boards on what it should look like. Can you explain the way you think the game should look?
Yeah, I mean, to me, absolutely. In a 9-team league, both in terms of the limited total number of teams and a lot of it has to do with the nature of the schedule, but a lot of it has to do with the 9-team league. I think it should just be standings that go 1 through 9 instead of splitting into 2 divisions where one division is 5 teams and the other division is 4 teams. The thing that stands out to me in terms of the flaw that exists here is if you want to do a division-based playoff format, then you need to play what I would call a division-based schedule where you're going to play more games within your division, intra-division games, than inter-division, i.e. playing against the other division. The way the Canadian Football League does their schedule is that every team plays every other team home and home. That accounts for 16 games. You make up the other 2 games with games in your division. So, yeah, the result when you're a West team is that, yes, you play 10 of your 18 games against your own division, and that's fine. But when you're an East team, you also play 10 of your 18 games against the West division. You're playing the other division more than you're playing your own division, all of which is totally inconsistent with a division-based playoff format. You go further into this and you start comparing to other leagues. As an example, using the NFL as an example, and obviously it's more teams, which allows you more flexibility. But where you have in the Canadian Football League, the East Division and the West Division are opposite sides of the bracket when you get to the playoffs. There are too many commonalities between the schedules of any East Division team and any West Division team. So when you look at them, any team in the East, any team in the West, they play each other twice out of their 18 games. That leaves 16 games. 14 of the remaining 16 games are against identical opponents, identical competition. So to sort of say, well, we can justify that, this team at 12-6 or 10-8 is in first place in one division and gets a home playoff game and a first round bye, while another team at 10-8 in the other division may be in fourth place and gets none of the above, or even third place and gets neither a home playoff game nor a bye. It doesn't make sense when their schedules are so similar. You compare, as I started to say earlier, to the National Football League. You have the AFC and the NFC that are on different sides of the playoff bracket. Teams don't meet in the playoffs unless it's in the Super Bowl, unless it's in the championship game. You take any AFC team and any NFC team, the maximum amount of their schedule that could be similar, that could be the same common opponents, is 50%. So you can justify that a team that's getting benefits of being in first place in its division on one side, their record may not be good enough for first place on the other side, but they're playing different opponents, so you can justify it. In the Canadian Football League, you can't. And especially when you look at the way that things have unfolded in recent years, 5 of the last 10 years, it's not just that the top 2 teams in the league have come from one division, and that being the West, but 5 of the last 10 years, the top 3 teams in the league, the 3 best records in the league, have all been in the West. And the way the CFL playoff format works is that puts those top 3 teams on the same side of the playoff bracket. It puts the next 3 teams, i.e. 4 through 6, on the other side of the playoff bracket. And, so the analogy that I have been using with people in explaining this is you think about the NCAA tournament, March Madness, where they have the selection committee where they evenly distribute the 64 teams in their 4 regions. But imagine if every other year, Madness, they just said, well, you know what, every other year we're just going to take teams 1 through 32 and put them all on one side of the bracket, and 33 through 64 will be together on the other side. And there's no way for the 2 best teams or 2 of even the best 4 teams to meet in the championship game and kind of shrug your shoulders and say that's okay. That's what the CFL is doing with its schedule and playoff format. And so, as I say, your schedule and your playoff format aren't aligned with each other. You need to change one or the other. And the easier one to change ultimately is the playoff format and the way you do your standings.
It's you know what, Duane, to me it's just so obvious. Like, it blows me away, and an outstanding way to break that down for so many of our viewers and listeners. Amazing job by that, and I know it's something that you are passionate about. But there's a saying out there, and you know it, that a lot of people believe and have believed for years that the Grey Cup is actually the West Final, right? And that bothers me. That bothers me because there are many times where you're saying, well, the West Final is featuring the 2 best teams statistically, at least in the standings. And why are they canceling each other out in the West Final to play a team that just finished 8-8 in the East? It's just so incredibly amazing to me. And yes, and I guess the argument for others will say, well, the Argonauts have won putting away the Argonauts have won some Grey Cups. Well, that's great, but to me, you want the best team. Every league sets their playoffs so that the best 2 teams meet. That's the way it's always set up. That's
the goal, right? And part of the challenge. And one thing I will say in fairness, like when you look at leagues of 30 plus teams, like the NHL, like the NFL, like the NBA, even like Major League Baseball. I mean, the fact is there is still a possibility that you can have, say, the top 2 teams, even the top 3 teams, come from the same division or from the same conference. And they would eliminate each other before you get to the final. But there's a huge difference when you're talking about 30 plus teams, right? Where a playoff bracket is going to be 16 teams, 8 on each side. That, as I say, in the Canadian Football League, you only have 6 teams in the playoffs. And you're literally putting the top half of those teams on the same side of the bracket every other year. Like, even to have the top 2 on the same side in a league where our playoff format doesn't allow for the top 2 teams in one division to meet in the Grey Cup game, right? And so I've looked at the math on this. There's a 44% chance in the Canadian Football League that the top 2 teams in the league will come from the same division, whether it's East or West. So you're just saying mathematically, not taking anything else into account, just on math, 44% of the time, we're not going to get the top 2 teams in the Grey Cup game. But, taking it a step further than that, like, you can have that happen in other leagues where the top 2 teams may come from the same division. And this is where I acknowledge, yes, I'm a Toronto Maple Leafs fan, and I can make a pretty good argument that the Toronto Maple Leafs were the second best team in the NHL last year, but they happened to be in the same division as Florida. But again, that's another show. But you can have that in other leagues. But here, what we're saying is you have pretty decent odds that the top half of your entire playoff field is going to fall on the same side of the bracket because of your formula. The math, when you have 16 teams in the playoffs, because your league is big enough to do that, is much smaller, that you're literally going to have the top 8 teams on one side and teams 9 through 16 on the other side. Like, I think it's less than a tenth of 1% or something like that. I forget the math because it's been a little while since I looked at it. But compared to the likelihood of the top 3 being in one division in the CFL versus, say, the top 8 being in one conference in the other leagues I mentioned, it's night and day. Like, a lot of this has to do with the size of the league. And, the other piece that I'll add here is, as you say, you want a situation that at least creates a path for the top 2 teams to meet in the championship game. It's not always going to happen, especially in the world of football where you do 1-game playoffs. It's not a best of 3, best of 5, best of 7 game series. 1-game playoff, anything can happen. But you need to at least create an avenue for the top 2 teams in any given year to meet in the championship game. But the other thing that you want in terms of your schedule format and your playoff format is you need the regular season to be meaningful. And when you are giving the team with sometimes in the case of the crossover, as I said, like, you can have the top 3 teams in the playoff field all be on one side of the bracket and then 4 through 6 on the other side. Well, I mean, in theory, team 6 matched up in a bracket with teams 5 and 4 has a more favorable playoff bracket than team 1, which has 2 and 3 in its bracket. And how does that make the regular season make sense when a 6th place team playing the same schedule, as I said, right? 10 games against the West, 8 against the East, playing the same schedule, has a better playoff situation than teams 1 through 3. Doesn't make sense.
I will be emailing this podcast to Commissioner Stuart Johnston. Now, he probably knows how you feel already, but
he knows exactly how I feel. He may not have done the math on it, but he certainly knows how I feel. And it's, again, like, I understand that a lot of people like an East versus West Grey Cup and the tradition of that. I appreciate the tradition, but a lot of the tradition is outdated, right? A lot of it for me goes back to the days when East and West were completely separate leagues, didn't see each other because of travel reasons until it got to the championship game. And there was this mystique, this air of mystery about the teams on the other side that you hadn't seen all year. We're past that. Every single game is on national television. Anybody in any market can see literally every single game played in the Canadian Football League. There are no secrets in terms of what's on the other side of the country. And again, it's a balanced regular season schedule, not unbalanced. So I mean, it doesn't make sense. You're seeing teams in the other division as much as you're seeing teams in your own division. And let's not forget, there have been a number of times, for everybody who wants East versus West, that Winnipeg has represented the East in the Grey Cup. That's not exactly an East-West Grey Cup, is it?
No. Duane,
if I want to continue this rant, which I could, I'll also point out, because a lot of people say, oh, well, we have the crossover that accounts for one division being stronger than the other. I'm just going to throw in there, how much sense does it make that a group of people making the rules and coming up with the format sit down in a room together and go, well, we need something to account for one division being stronger than the other. And the solution that you come up with is that the only team in the strong division that gets rewarded in any way, shape, or form for their division being stronger is the fourth place team. Not the first place team, not the second place team, not the third place team. The fourth place team is the only one that gets any kind of reward from one division being stronger than the other. Does that make sense?
No.
Makes about as much sense as the goalpost being in the middle of the field. Just saying.
Just saying. Duane, I know you're a man of spirit. You're a man of family. And I had to be reminded of this as we're unfortunately, the clock is against us. We only got about 5 minutes left. But I will say this. You have a father who I know means tremendous amount to you as someone, Nova Scotia roots, as one of the first, and the first actually, black educators in the Peel region. You were also very fortunate to marry a woman that's in the same industry. It's been many years in the same industry as you and I. And there's a quote that I saw that she had that it really touched me. It's right here. I may have grown up on the wrong side of the fence, but I chose the other side. I choose love. In this statement, she is talking about a white woman with more British backgrounds marrying a black man. And you, as I said, you're a visible man. She's been a visible person as well, too, in this industry. What does that all mean to you?
It's funny that you ask that, because one of the things that stands out to me is, it goes back to my father. And he was the first black teacher hired by the Peel Board of Education, went on to become a principal for over 25 years in the board. And my brothers and I talk about this often, is that he was never one who talked a lot about race or, even, kind of being any different than anybody else. Yet it's pretty obvious that he experienced a lot of that, and even more than we did. But looking back, I recognize that a lot of that for him was, it was never going to be an excuse. There were things that he wanted to accomplish in life, and nothing was going to be an obstacle to him. He was going to accomplish those things, even if nobody had done it before. He recognized what he wanted to do as a career and set out and accomplished it. And as a result, we kind of grew up not feeling like there were any barriers and just set out to accomplish the things that we wanted to accomplish, regardless of whether the other people trying to do those things looked like us or not. And so that's, that is the way that I have always lived. I think that's the way that I've raised my children. And, I would say things have worked out pretty well so far. So I have no complaints in that regard.
Duane, I really appreciate you answering that question. I know it's something that is important to you. It's certainly important to me. And I know as times have changed over the years, we still are battling some issues out there. Not a perfect world anywhere we go, even in this wonderful country called Canada. But appreciate your opinions and your thoughts on that. Hey, this has been great. This has been amazing. Talking football with someone like yourself, I know, is a great thing for me. I know that our viewers and our listeners really appreciate your opinions and your thoughts. And, hey, we're just down in the stretch drive in the Canadian Football League. It's the best time of the year. Thank you for joining us on the Sportsline Podcast, partner.
Absolutely. My pleasure, Bubba. Anytime, my friend.
All right. Take care. That's your Sportsline podcast for the day. And if you've just seen and heard, we'd love talking sports. If you do know of an athlete, team, or event to promote, the Sportsline podcast do want to hear from you. Please hit that thumbs up, like, and subscribe button. And if you have something to say, always appreciate your comments. For the outstanding people that make the Sportsline podcast possible, for you, I thank you. I thank you all. And we'll see you real soon.